Charity. Charity Schmidt, and she needs no introduction either. She's become a great friend. The one thing we have to admire, she started this Wisconsin battle, and I know she did it all by herself.
Oh, all by myself, right, yeah. Yeah, you guys keep talking about us young people, but how do you guys do this for decades on end? I'm exhausted. But I'm learning. You have energy, and you guys inspire me and keep me energized, so thank you. So, as Nancy talked about her kind of shining favorite moment, or the highlight of her life, I'll share with you guys all a video from the highlight of my life so far. Can I just have the lights up here dimmed for just a few minutes? Who does that?
The staff does that.
Where's Alan?
I was the technical guy last time.
I can start by saying a few things. So I'm here to talk about the Wisconsin uprising of 2011, and as probably a lot of you know the details, and I don't have time to get into them, but when you look at it, essentially it was an attack on public goods and public workers. What we saw was the taking away of collective bargaining rights and all the things that come with that representation for public workers. It was cutting off, almost destroying our Badger Care, which is our Medicaid system in Wisconsin. It came with $311 million in cuts to the University of Wisconsin system. And so you really had all these attacks on public workers and public goods. And so students were really crucial in leading the march to the Capitol that started the occupation and getting the public hearing going that went on for days on end, people speaking in 2-minute intervals, each 2 minutes, and we kept that going for days on end, uplifting and giving the Democrats enough brevity to actually leave the state to block the vote. And so, okay, thank you. So here's a short video done by a TA member, Shaheen Azadi, from the early days of the uprising.
Do the front lights dim?
I think that's fine. You guys can see, yeah?
A little more.
This is something that I wanted to do for my entire life.
It's not about a budget problem. It is about the corporate takeover of Wisconsin, and we won't stand for it.
I am the back of the working class.
That's good.
the state's going to pay money to educate us. I would think they'd want us to stick around and contribute back.
Reducing the quality of the university makes it difficult to attract federal grants and outside research monies that form a huge part of the local Wisconsin economy.
So it will affect the value of my education that my parents and I have worked and saved for.
We have the right to live in a state and in a country and in a society where we take care of each other.
We are judged by how we help the least among us.
The right men and women who return home deserve good jobs with a living wage.
Teachers, nurses, it's industrial workers who actually create the real wealth of this country. Stand together, stand together.
Okay. So, again, the moment of solidarity, the most solidarity that I've experienced and witnessed in my life, where you had this moment where you had teachers and their students, and you had people from private unions and private workers and public workers, people from all over the spectrum in Wisconsin in one place fighting the same battle. Nothing can be more inspiring, really, than that. We had, 10,000 people on the first day of the hearing, 20,000 people the second, 30,000 people the third, 50,000 people that weekend for a march, 100,000 the next weekend, 200,000 the weekend after that. And then they still sneak the bill out of a fiscal, this is hard to describe, but out of a fiscal bill so that they can pass it with those 14 Democratic senators gone, breaking the open meetings laws, among other things, and actually, so passing Act 10, which took away collective bargaining rights, unconstitutionally. So despite 200,000 people on the streets, despite having our rights taken away in an unconstitutional process, I don't know what happened that organized labor decided that that wasn't the time for a general strike, or that wasn't the time for a march on Washington, or as Jerry puts it, a march on Madison. So if this wasn't the time when we had the guts to stand up, I don't know when that time is going to be. So we have a lot of work cut out for us. But the solidarity we felt in there, a lot of people feel disappointed because that didn't end in a strike or a huge march. But that solidarity we built in that Capitol over those 3 weeks, it still continues today. So I'm just going to talk about a couple of examples of how it continues and how I feel it and work with it in my daily life. So quickly, I'll say that with privatization, the privatization of public education is happening all over this country, and Madison is no exception. So Walker is trying to privatize our university system. One way he's doing that is a complete overhaul of the human resources system, and just one very brief example is actually removing and trying to get rid of an entire classification and category of workers that had representation by a union, and just making that disappear. So they were now these workers in another category who don't have access. We've been able to fight that back to some extent, so the workers that are there now in that unit can continue to be. However, new workers won't be given that choice. But that's one small battle that we've made, and we've made some others in that fight against privatization that I can't get into today, but it comes from day after day of building coalitions between faculty members, between staff, whether it be the people who are working to serve food to students in the kitchens, or be it people who are in staff, in the offices answering phones, and handling all of our paperwork, right? And then, of course, students, undergraduate students, graduate students. But every small victory we make makes that coalition building stronger and gives it more energy to keep going. So that is one way that we built a campus-wide coalition. And then a little bit with the TAA, the Teaching Assistants Association. If you remember back to February 2011 when this was going on, I mean, we saw this demonization of teachers. So people who choose to spend their whole day with kindergartners, right? And all of a sudden they're the bad guy, and they're stealing our money, and they have these great pensions, what is wrong with them? So when you see this push to make all these, for unions to make all these concessions, right? Give up our pensions that we've worked for, give up, a living wage, et cetera, et cetera. In that atmosphere, it's really hard to push forward and ask for a raise. The TAA is actually doing that just now, where we have a bread and butter campaign where we're not just asking for a raise, but for teaching assistants and graduate assistant workers at UW-Madison, we actually make, the average worker makes below poverty wages. It's about $9,700 a year. We pay about $1,100 a year back in fees as students. We've lost about $1,600 accounted for inflation in the last decade in our wages. So it's not that just that we want a raise, but they owe us money. So that is why our campaign is called Pay Us Back. They owe us. That is, we talked about entitlement. No, we have worked for that money, and it's time to pay us back. So one of the things that we did just the other day actually was had a grade-in called Fighting for the Greater Good, which is a great little pun. And so what we did is just in the administration building, graduate student assistants, especially teaching assistants came, did their grading, did their homework, did their research, held their office hours, so students would come in. A lot of undergrads showed up to show support, and we did this in the seat of power in the university so that they see the work we do and see the difference that we make every day with our work and how important it is. And going back to the cartoon I was just showing, Bucky, the TAA Bucky, is holding up the university because we are one of the backbones of the university, and we need to make those in decision-making parts of the university realize that, right? So this is why we're showing. Another thing that I'm working with that I'm really proud of is there's a Milwaukee-based pizza company called Palermo's who have egregious working conditions. We're talking about workers losing fingers in the factory, sleeping on the factory floor, women being forced to work overtime until 3 days before they give birth, forced overtime, missing holidays year after year, etc. And so we've worked to try to make that company accountable and change its practices. We found out as students that our university has sponsorship and licenseship agreements with that company, so they get to put Bucky the Badger on their pizza as a logo. So we've been working to try to stop that as students using our leverage of power that we have. We've been working on that for months. Our interim chancellor is not doing a very good job of listening to us. We've done letter writing campaigns, and we've done petitions, and the labor licensing policy committee we worked with to make sure, or for them to have the necessary research and stuff to request to the chancellor and to demonstrate that Palermo's is against our labor code of conduct and they need to be dropped from the contracts, right? So we've been working on that for months and months and months with little reaction, not sufficient reaction. So about a week and a half ago, we occupied our chancellor's office. And this is, within 3.5 hours, I think, the police were in and actually arresting us from our own chancellor's office. And now we are facing non-academic misconduct charges. But we're staying strong and we're doing it for the workers. The whole point is to actually get these workers back. I'm sorry, I failed to mention that the workers went on strike last June 1st. Because they tried to form a union, and then Palermo's called in ICE, immigration, on these workers when they tried to form a union, and fired a bunch of other workers. So that is, going back to the immigration issues and about standing up for all workers, and especially those who are most vulnerable. So we've been working on that since June 1st. Here we were arrested, still working on the campaign. And then just here's a bunch of the organizers of the occupation, occupiers, and Claremont Workers, who are now called Claremont Workers Union. They have a solidarity fund. Please feel free to find it online and support them. So I'll just bring it back to my point, because I'm probably at 10 minutes, right? Close. Okay, so I guess my main point is that we should all be looking at higher education as an arena for social justice for a couple different reasons. One, it's a public good, at least in public higher ed. It's a public good. The universities are ours, right? They're our resources. They're there to serve us. And we need to make them accountable to us and make sure they are serving us. Students and faculty have leverages of power that not all workers have, right? We can go in and get arrested and we're gonna be fine. But Claremont Workers couldn't do that kind of thing, right? And so students and faculty have leverages of power that need to be used. And also we can be huge resources for all workers because of all the research that's done, all the resources that higher ed can provide for social justice movements. Also, it's important, I think, because we have this academic elite in this country who don't think of themselves as workers. And we really need to bring them back and make them realize where they actually stand in the relations of power, right? This idea of the middle class, it's gone. It's now an illusion. There is no such thing. It is workers and it is capitals. And we need to, if we really want to build a long-term working class consciousness in this country, we need to be engaging all workers, especially for those who think just because they have some autonomy in their work and they get to, they have a lot of choice in the work that they do, that they're not workers, that they're not exploited, and that they're not actually on our side of it. And so we really need to get rid of this idea of this middle class and this illusion, and get rid of this, we need to disillusion the academic elite to make them realize that they are also workers. When we don't do those kind of things, we actually play into the divide and conquer strategy, right, where you have these divisions among workers, and I think we need to, I think that's the key, that you build worker power across the spectrum. And so I'm honored to be here with all of you. Sorry if I went over time. And I'm really excited. I hope I see all of you back in Madison, Wisconsin next year, if that's where the Labor Fight Back conference is. And I'm also excited to build this network with you, because when a capital occupation like that happens next, I want a real network of workers and social justice leaders to be ready, because it's up to us to push it forward and to do a real labor fight back. So thank you for listening.